Well, we will get started. Good morning, everybody. So some of us are new to the class here last week, so I'm going to review a little bit, but we're kind of, each time we go through a week, we want to try to reinforce what we learned and discussed in the previous week or previous weeks. I was looking for, there's Casey. I wanted to welcome Matt and Casey, who are Jake's sister and brother-in-law. Welcome, glad to have you guys here. Great to see you, baby. And if you would say a prayer for both them and Jake's parents who are flying back to California. Tools. So we talked last week, especially for those that weren't here last week. I love tools. And what's interesting is and my thought is, the Bible, number one, is the ultimate tool, but there are various scriptures within the Bible of which can be very useful for us. If you were to ask me why I love tools, I guess one of the reasons would be I love to build things. Many of you do a lot of work with woodworking. Perhaps you're in some type of a creative type of profession, or maybe it's a hobby. Certainly tools can be used to do your job. Some of the answers that you gave last week I thought were very insightful. Like, for example, David said his favorite tool is his brain. Well, I hadn't really thought about that, but having a good functional brain is an amazing tool, and one that we want to use the most of. We have, let me check here, go back, not ready for that one. I guess since it's here, it's out of order right now. This is a different one. I've asked everyone in this class, and I have not gotten one from everybody yet. But I would like a half-page summary of your story, for example. Bring it to class, put your name on it, and the questions of which you're going to answer are one of two things. If you were not raised in the Lord's church, what situation, person, and or verses led you to an understanding to become baptized and to become a part of, and that becoming, it became a part of your life, a necessary part of your life to be a member of the Lord's church. Number two, if you were raised in the church, then why do you choose to continue to stay in the Lord's church? And I want you to put some thought into it. I received 3 or 4, and I was very interested in what I read, because people have different points of view on how they explain their personal story. But I want you to keep in mind one particular thing. If you were to read your essay to a friend who was outside of the church, let's say, for example, an opportunity came around that you had an opportunity to share your faith with a friend and you had 30 seconds to do so, would your story be convincing? And what made me ask that question is that a lot of the stories that I've read, the testimonials, for lack of a better word, have to do a lot with feelings. Sometimes some people have very logical thoughts of why they justify what they do. And I'm not saying feelings are bad, but when you want to have a convincing story for a friend, they might come across from the standpoint of my feelings are just as good as your feelings. See what I'm saying? What might be a specific verse that touched your heart? That's I'm looking for things that may be a little more concrete, or perhaps a point of view that might steer someone back to reading the Bible for themselves. So if you haven't written your story just yet, I encourage you, please, to do so. Wrong way. We talked about the definition of a tool, being anything that's used as a means of accomplishing a task or purpose. This was interesting. I'd asked the group about what your favorite tool is. Maybe it's something for cooking. And Courtney said a dumbbell because she's into weightlifting and helping other people achieve that. We had some others. There may have been a few people. Vic, what's your favorite tool? I don't think you were here last week.
I wasn't here. What is my favorate tool for?
For any type of purpose or function that you do on a regular basis.
Oh, wow.
You have a go-to tool.
Oh, man. My go-to tool. I don't. Ooh. All right, I'll say the obvious answer for me, honestly, the older I've gotten, Bible.
Bible? Okay.
Honestly, I mean, that's my favorite tool because it helps me through when I get frustrated, when I start getting mad at my kids, when I start getting frustrated with my students, anything, I'm telling you, I always pop back to the book of James, James specifically, and talking about the tongue, how the tongue is an evil, it can set a whole world on fire. That's my tool. It really is. It keeps me in check almost every day.
Great answer.
Keeps me in check.
Great answer. I have a drill driver by DeWalt, 18 volt, and when I see it, I respond the same way every time. Hello, lover. I love that tool. and I will keep that tool as long as 18 volts is allowed to take place. And I'm at threat. It's a threat now because everything's 20 volts nowadays. But I absolutely love that tool because it has never let me down. I have dropped it frequently, and I pick it up and it goes to work. It is a tool that I will not be without. Now Matt's a fireman. What would you say is your go-to tool as a fireman?
Probably a Halligan tool.
A what?
Halligan. It's
I have no idea what that is.
very versatile tool. You can use it for a lot of things.
Like, can you give us some examples? What would you use it for?
Breaking down a door.
Breaking down the door?
Yeah.
Is it a
No, it's
heavy machine?
It has like a hook, and then on the other hand, it has like a pry bar. So.
Oh, very cool. Now, firemen have that tool that everybody is amazed by, the jaws of life. Do you guys carry that with you on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
Yeah, it is.
Whenever there was an accident that you heard about, the first question that was asked was, did they use the jaws of life? It is a tool, and it's something that we discussed last week, is that oftentimes we like to have a tool or need a tool because we cannot function or do a function without it. Alan Stewart came to me afterwards and he said one of his favorite tools that didn't even occur to him was a mallet. I don't use a mallet very often, but it is a type of hammer, but it's a softer hammer. And if he uses a regular hammer, he is not going to get the results that he really is seeking. He won't do without it. Now, Brian Boyd had another good suggestion, and that was that of a tape measure. Now, how might we parallel Christianity with a tape measure? Any thoughts on it? What is a tape measure? It is a standard. A standard of what? Measurement. And if we do not have a standard of measurement, what happens?
Just about anything goes. We don't know the answer. We don't know what we need.
From a building standpoint, if you were to say, I need a cabinet built of 3 units by 5 units, what could we expect? How big would that cabinet be? Would you shaking your head, David? What do you say?
You have no idea.
You have no idea what you're going to get. You have no idea if you're going to get what you paid for. You don't even know if it's going to function, period. Without a standard, we really have nothing. And a tape measure, I think, is a great analogy of the Bible, of God's Word, in that it is our standard. Now, if you look at the world as a whole, they don't embrace that standard. And what is the result?
It's usually fortune, fame, or I don't know what else you need. But fortune and fame are probably the world's 2 largest scams.
Right. Greed, maybe being a part of fortune. Fame, perhaps a desire for power. If there's one thing that we should be praying about is Russia versus Ukraine. I don't know that I've ever seen what could become World War III as close as what we're going on now. Hopefully it's just a lot of hot air and smoke and mirrors. But the potential for disaster is there, and perhaps that's part of a lack of worldly or a biblical standard. And a tape measure, I think, is something that is certainly applicable to us. We talked about the missing tool, and from the discussion last week, if you weren't here, if you are talking with a friend who is struggling with something, you want to help them, or perhaps you know the Bible is their answer, and yet you're missing your tool. Maybe there is a specific verse of which could change their life for eternity, and yet you're missing that tool. That's one of our goals for this class. Improper use of a tool. There are situations of which perhaps you know they need to know of a particular chapter in the Bible that will be of help to them, but if you give them the wrong one, it might actually cause more harm than good. Did you have a thought?
I was just thinking about the verse, what does it profit man to gain the whole world if he loses his own soul?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of the two contrasts of the standards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very, very pertinent. Class objectives. We want to learn how to use the tools for our own personal benefit and for the use with others, and to also increase our involvement. Comfort zone. It's not the best of pictures. Leonard and I were talking about comfort zones after class last week. And what I found, especially in my business life way back when, nothing makes you more uncomfortable than to talk about your comfort zone. And it's just a reality of life. And yet, where would we be now if 10, 20 years ago we did not step out of or work beyond that prior comfort zone? There are two Japanese phrases of which perhaps some of you in business, I believe if I remember, one of them was called Kaizen and the other one Hoshin. One is incremental small improvements, and the other is blockbuster leapfrog, like going from a Walkman to your iPod. That was a huge, gigantic step, not an incremental one. Incremental one might be going from your iPhone 4 to what is now, 14? 13, 14? If it's not 14, it's 13. So my challenge to you is to challenge your own personal comfort zone. Now, baby steps. For some reason, I'm seeing babies everywhere. I know they've always been around, but I can't explain it. But I notice babies a lot more for the last 2.5 weeks than I used to. And that's a great thing. But when it comes to we've all heard of baby steps. You know, maybe you've heard it from your boss, or maybe you've heard it from somewhere as you're coming and going, that it's good to take baby steps. And maybe that's one way of challenging your comfort zone. You can't envision yourself making a giant leap, but you can envision some baby steps. And that's what I want us to kind of embrace, the baby step. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But when you have a child that starts to stand and holds the edge of the couch or the table, that's a pretty good progression. But as you see on the right, when that baby lets go from one parent to the next, or perhaps they let go of that coffee table and they start going towards mom and dad, there's no parent alive, or grandparent for that matter, that doesn't remember the day that happened. It's still a baby step. But man, what a huge achievement. You're going from being incapable of transporting yourself to freedom like you've never seen before. Now, I've seen some young babies who can take off and outrun their parents sometimes. So maybe a little too much freedom could get a little scary. But I don't want us to downplay the baby step. embrace the baby step. And I believe that you will benefit from that, your family will benefit from it, but most importantly, we want more souls in heaven as a result of your baby steps and my baby steps. This class is as much about what I need as much as we all need. Now, everybody has a piece of paper. Write a vertical line next to all the answers that were given last week. Do you need a pen? Anybody else need a pen or paper? What you need? Okay. Everybody have a pen and paper? You need one? And you need a pen? What you need? Go. Okay, cool. So draw a vertical line to the right of the answers, and on the top, write today's date, 2/13. Doesn't need to be 22. So for those who weren't here last week, we're going to take a test every week. I am challenging your baby steps. And I am challenging myself to take some baby steps. But I rewrote the questions because I actually want to put this in a graph so that as we go throughout the quarter, we can watch our progress. And I feel like this is a team effort, but has a lot of potential for good. So, answer the question, how many days this week did you read your Bible? And yes, if you were in church and you read a scripture that somebody else was reading, we'll count that as a Bible read. I will tell you right now, I missed a couple days. Even though I'm a teacher trying to be prepared for my class, I did not read that Bible every week, or every day of this week. Number 2, how many visitors at church did you speak with this week? Now here's something interesting. Again, this is anonymous. I'm not going to see your name on these pages, so please, if you've put your name on there, scratch it out. Doesn't matter to me. I want this to be something that will be a reflection of you for you. But somebody wrote, we have not had any visitors for a while. And I kind of understand that with COVID going on, we haven't had as many visitors as we used to. But we have had a pretty steady number of occurrences that have resulted in visitors. We have a couple, if you haven't met them yet. On the left is a older man, brown hair, gray beard, had a brown jacket. I think he was sitting in front of you. His name is Mark. His wife's name is Vei. She is of Asian ancestry. So if you see them, meet them. Their son and daughter just moved here from Arizona, and they need a church home. And then the two of them say a prayer for Mark and Vei because they're shopping for a house, and that is not an easy thing to do these days. So we are getting visitors. 3, how many days did you have conversations with a new member this week? A new member being someone that has placed membership within the last year. 4, how many days did you pray in a public place? It is fascinating to me how praying, like let's say at a restaurant, maybe you're going to pray at church, at work. You certainly don't want to do it to be seen by other people for the sake of your own self-esteem, There are plenty of scriptures of why that is a bad thing. But I am encouraged, and for whatever reason, I have noticed in the last 6 months, other strangers at various tables at restaurants that have stopped to say a prayer. Wow, that, to me, well, let me ask you, I'm doing most of the talking here. Why might that be a good thing if someone saw you as a family say a prayer before you leave?
For one, it lets them know that you believe in God, and they see that you're not ashamed to publicly display your belief.
Okay, I think there's some courage, perhaps, involved.
Or even encouragement. It can be encouragement.
Know that there's somebody else out there in the restaurant that's...
Yeah, might you inspire? I have no way of knowing this, and I certainly don't need to know it, nor do I want to know it. But if I said a prayer with my family that resulted in a stranger starting to say a prayer in church, that is very motivating for me to do that. I think being a Christian example is a powerful message, even if it's one that's subtle and it's intentional, but it's not necessarily, I'm doing this to be in your face. Any other thoughts of why that might be?
Be better on your test.
Whatever motivation you need. That's a good thing. I've known some very patriotic people. Jason is a very patriotic. Maybe he's taking it from the southern states point of view. You used to have a Confederate, Memorial Day picnic. But I have a customer now who flies the American flag and the colonial flag. And I asked him, why is that? He said, because I'm about what America stood for back in 1776. He is really instilled in the values of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. And I got a charge out of that. I thought, man, that's awesome. We all should be like that. I think it's a valuable thing to pray in public just to show that I'm an American who practices freedom of religion. I think that is a very American thing to do. But you know, and maybe I don't know if I mentioned this last week. I mentioned it to somebody. April and I were at Grinds and Wines, and outside the tables are kind of close together. But when we were served our food, we prayed, and the lady sitting next to us listened, and she commented on how it encouraged her to hear us say a prayer like that. April invited her to church. It was a Wednesday night, and she declined. But a door was opened that we would never have thought to even knock on, so to speak, figuratively speaking. So, those type of things, maybe at work, it'd be another place of which you do it subtly, but perhaps could open a door. Number 5, how many days did you have a meal with a visitor or a new member this last week? I know that's a bit of a stretch. But I know when April and I have been changing our membership due to a move or whatever, the friendships that were formed the quickest and the most solid were those who, with people who invited us just to go to lunch with. We've even been visiting with vacations or whatever, visiting at a congregation, and total strangers asked to go to lunch with no anticipation of us placing membership, just being a friendly person. And wouldn't you know, we very quickly found that we had mutual friends. I encourage you to do that if you're not doing that already. Number 6, how many days did you offer to pray for a person? And I'm specifically thinking of someone outside the church. How many days did you offer to pray for a person this week, and did you follow up? Have you ever had anybody that you know is not a member of the Lord's church or a spiritual person that actually offered to pray for you? Has anybody ever had anybody do that? How does that make you feel? Courtney, how does it make you feel?
Fine, good.
I mean, it's a positive thing, is it not? Anybody else? Who else?
Yeah. I mean, it always feels like, okay, that's really nice that they would offer to do that. That means that they actually seem to care about them.
Yeah. There's a level of care that's been. Did I see another hand go up on the right? Yeah, Andrea?
Yeah, it seems like like Leonard said, that they care about you to take the time to first of all offer and then secondly do it.
I've been taking a kickboxing class, and it is, well, there are days where I'm the only man there sometimes, and there's one other guy. And the rest, I don't know, 15 to 20 ladies in the class. Ladies love grandbabies and babies. So when word got out my daughter was about to give birth, I had several say, I'm going to pray for your daughter. One in particular got my attention because she asked, what is your daughter's name? Wow. That's something. You can have the same touching effect, personal effect, when you do that for someone else. And perhaps a door might open that you have a path, a journey with that person on a spiritual level that just may not have materialized had you not offered to pray for them. Now, I reworded the last one. How many days did you have a conversation with a person that is not a member of the church that included a spiritual or biblical reference, even if it was subtle? So what I mean by that is, well, I'll give you an example. I was at work this week. I was talking with a lady, and I mentioned that my father-in-law is a minister. The same customer I think I mentioned last week. I told her my quote would be late because I needed to work on my Sunday school lesson. That's the kind of seed planting I'm encouraging you to do. Maybe when somebody asks you, how was your weekend? I have the most amazing Sunday school teacher now. Well, maybe you say something like, I had a really interesting Sunday school class. And leave it at that. And then the football game was great. But my challenge is, let's try to turn the doorknob just a little bit. Those baby steps can lead to something big that may just surprise you. There was, getting back to visitors. When you think of someone visiting the congregation here, what type of people or categories might they be? I'll tell you one. Someone who lives out of town, that's passing through town, and going to worship is of such importance to them that they will plug into the local community church. That's Jake.
Well, I can think of two. I
Go
think
ahead. Say what?
one would be people who are moving to the area looking for a congregation,
Right.
and the other would just be people in the congregation looking for a new church home, whether it be the Church of Christ or not.
Okay. So people looking for either a new church or you mentioned someone coming from out of town. There's a young couple not too long ago, a couple months, and they were moving from and have moved here from South Africa. And 3 little girls. And when they said South Africa, I thought they may not be members of the Lord's church, because it's not very strong in South Africa. But then the other, maybe they are. You don't know. It's kind of like a treasure hunt when you talk to a visitor. There's limitless potential. They left before church was over. I was hoping to follow up with them. I think maybe Ken was the only other person to speak with them, and that's because I brought him to his attention. But they haven't been back, and thankfully they filled out a card, and it turned out they were looking for a church that had a great youth program for their little kids. Well, I can't think of a better church than ours. But it happened to be fall break weekend, and most all of our young kids were out of town. We have a great new painted hallway that they entered through, but there's not a single picture or indication that we're a church that functions or focuses on young people. So I feel like there's an opportunity lost. I tried to send some encouraging words about last to leaders and things like that. But anyways, you never know. Maybe they'll come back because they're searching, and maybe this is what they're looking for. But approaching and letting the more reinforcement we have to visitors, the better. So here's where I'd like to do a little brainstorming, and that's not what I'd hoped to get. Maybe I'll just have to do it by hand. So has everybody finished their test? If you would, pass those up. And your pens, I need those for next. Yeah, Johnny, thank you so much. Hey, Johnny, you want to take that around? So we talked about tools.
Thank you.
We talked about tools as being helpful to accomplish a task. And we talked about how scriptures for biblical topics can be tools of which can make our lives better, can make the lives of our friends, families, and strangers better. What I hope for us as a team, as a class, is to do some brainstorming and to share a lot of our personal experiences for the benefit of everybody else. I'm curious if you have a certain method or a way that you have been able to steer conversations towards a biblical response. I want to know about it. I want to share it with everybody. So the question is for you is and just whatever comes in your head, what are some of the typical topics that we have conversations about? You're shaking your head, Laura.
Kids.
Kids, absolutely. What about kids? Can you be more specific?
Health, kids, struggles with kids, raising kids, teaching kids.
Raising kids?
What you're going through with yours right now versus what they're going through with theirs.
Yeah. How to raise, and doesn't everybody, whether you're a member of the church or not, or whether you're of Islam or Jewish faith or an atheist, everybody wants high-functioning, healthy, productive kids. Everybody wants that. So that is something that's frequently spoken about. Bill, did you have your hands up?
During work, there's an importance on a higher power with the people that I work with, the clients that I work with, patients I work with, and looking at the higher power and trying to help them recognize that there's a difference between a fake higher power, one that really isn't, and one that really is. And so I'm just use that almost every day. I'm trying to help people see, the difference between God and themselves as a higher power, or the tree, or the turkey out there in the yard, or whatever their thoughts might be, and just helping them to recognize that there is a true one higher power. And if you don't tap into that, then it's going to come back and bite you.
I think that's a great thought. When you were describing that, it reminded me when I was, I don't know how old, 13, 15, somewhere in there. I love to build model cars, planes, boats, whatever. I once bought a model and there were 0 instructions in that box. And a whole lot of parts. And all I had was a picture on the cover of that box. How well do you think that model turned out? Some kind of like military equipment. I was into Army men at the time, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that. I had a lot of spare parts when I was finished. And I got pretty close and I was kind of proud of it. And when I saw, hey, there's no instructions, I didn't have the internet to tap into, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to take this challenge and I'm going to see what comes out. If I just had the instructions, I could have done so much better. And when you talk about that higher power, or the Bible as being the instruction manual for life and the instruction manual for afterlife, if we, or people in general, try to get through life without even reading that instruction manual, they're inevitably going to have roadblocks and extra parts, meaning extra problems that could have been avoided if you were just using the instruction manual. I have installed, I don't know how many have installed a ceiling fan? One or more ceiling fans. I've lost count. 200, easy 200. I always read the instructions because I've found there's a little upside down cone-shaped collar that if I don't get that on now,
I haven't installed those. Lots of them.
I've got to take the whole thing apart. I've literally lost an hour plus because I fully assembled this part. I take the packaging apart, and there's that piece of cone right there that hides the junction of the rod and the motor. And whoa, I can't not fix that. That's life to me. And if we're getting through life without owning some of these important verses, then we're going to have that missing part. We're going to have problems that are going to be a lot more difficult. Isn't that the case? If we would just do things the right way the first time, how much easier life would be than if we had the instructions and ownership. So, how are we doing on time? We got 2 minutes. All right, high power. Throw out some other ideas. What we talk about? Casey.
At work, I have a coworker that is a Christian. She doesn't go to Church of Christ, but she's a Christian. And so she always asks me about my schedule, like, or what I'm going to be doing after school. And a lot of times on Wednesday, I'll talk to her about how I leave from after work at around 4:30, because I do after school help, to go home to cook dinner to eat and then turn around and go to church. And she's always like, wow, I couldn't even imagine. That seems like so much. And I think that my students have overheard, because I've actually had one of my students come up to me and ask me if he says, so you're a Christian, right? And he's asked me about how much I read my Bible, and that he tries to read it every day. And he's asked me questions. And so by merely saying that I go to church on Wednesday nights and Sundays, he's starting to ask me more questions about being a Christian.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Good for you. So I'm going to narrow that down to just activities. We talk to you in general conversations what you up to, what keeps you busy, whether after work or whatever. And you were, I think, very wise and brave to take that next step and present an opportunity. Yes, Jake, did you have thought?
Well, no, not to go along with that, just separately.
What else? We talk about health, kids, work. We talk about, usually it's a complaint of some kind.
How we handle our outlook on life. I get that question a lot because I'm a very positive person, and people ask me all the time, especially recently, you're going through all this. You're such a positive person. I really appreciate your positivity, and I say, I just talk to God about it. And it's just,
if there's something that's encouraging to me, when there is a person who is, cancer seems to be the one that sticks out the most, but it can be any personal illness. But when I see that person in church, I feel that. That's a positive, non-verbal way to encourage people. You had thought?
I'm very blessed in that I get to see some, from an interesting perspective, a lot of people out on the radio, sunrises, sunsets, and shooting stars. And it's always an opportunity for me to say something. First off, hey, how can you imagine looking out at all this and just thinking this was an accident?
An explosion of which resulted in all this.
It is. It's an amazing thing to see God's creation in 35 7,000 feet. You just possibly sit there and look at it.
We're all an accident. It makes me sad to know there are people going through this life who just think there's a phrase, you could say YOLO, you only live once, but it's I have only one life to pursue whatever personal wants or desires, to maximize these 100 or less years for the sake of making myself happy, and there's nothing beyond that. How hollow and empty that must feel, right? If we come across people that have that point of view, I think they're just as ripe of an opportunity to share something more that God has intended for us than anybody else. We should never write those people off. If they say, I don't believe in God, that is a door that has just been opened for you. Because to me, and people say, well, science, science, science. I am so sick and tired of hearing about science because our society has made science God. But God created science. But that's an opportunity. We see it as a problem. We might see it as a roadblock, but it's just as much of an opportunity as it is anything. Yes, Jason.
Bryan, did you see that the head of NASA, he was talking about the James Webb Telescope, and it can see further than any telescopes ever seen before, much further than Hubble. And he did a biblical reference. He stated a biblical reference, which is historical in NASA, going all the way back to when we landed on the moon. And of course, liberals hit the fan over that; they couldn't stand it. But he used that as an opportunity.
Wow, good for him. I admire his bravery.
Certainly science related, but he sees that there's a bigger picture there.
And I want to be as brave as that person. And I want to encourage us to all be at that level of bravery, because you got to face it. There are some lifestyle changes going on, and there are certain morality is being diluted to the point where you could lose your job if you say the wrong thing, even if it is solid biblical truth. And there's a way you could say it gently, and there's a way you could be like a hammer and perhaps used in the wrong way. That frightens me sometimes, and perhaps that might even hinder you from wanting to share something that could be powerful and meaningful for that person. But maybe losing that job would be the best thing that you'd ever experience. I can't tell you one way to do one way or the other. I know we're about out of time. I'm trying to think of just a few more things that we might talk about. We talk about kids, maybe parents. Maybe we have aging parents. I've talked to a lot of people about that. Sports. Boy, do we not talk about sports? Yes, Laura?
I was just going to say, one thing I think has been a good tool for me and kind of people in my age group, we see each other on Facebook a lot more than we see each other in real life lately, the last couple of years. And people are always putting out there what they're going through. Whether they're having surgery or their family's sick or they're even going on a trip or whatever you're up to. That's a really good chance to say, I'll pray for you. Of course, then it's the challenge to yourself to actually do it. Because there's a whole lot of people who say, oh, prayers, 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 and you wonder how many of them are going to be that, or that's just the standard thing that they always say to their friends. But it is a good chance. And I've had people that later on, when you actually do run into them in real life, they remember. They'll say, I appreciate that. Remember when you did that surgery and you said you're praying? Because maybe nobody else said anything about praying. Maybe they said, oh, you'll be in my thoughts or something like that.
Yeah, you see a lot of that. I see that a lot of the news. Let's all think about so-and-so. Well, why don't you have the courage to say prayer? Any other quickies? I know we're out of time. Maybe we'll add to the list next time. But
entertainment stuff.
Entertainment? Movies.
Music,
Oh, yeah.
Concerts and whatever else.
That is a huge topic of discussion. Entertainment, like it's spelled. But sometimes people just like to vent, do they not? They got struggles. And they're going to explode if they don't share them. So I want us to learn some verses that are going to make their lives better. I want us to own them and have it as ready as my drill driver from DeWalt. That's my goal for us as a class, to have these things, to empower us, to enable other people to take advantage of what the Bible has out there. Thank you for your comments. Look forward to next week.